Sure, I'll tell you, but let me just step back a minute. When you mentioned Presidential Directive 51, if that's the name of it, I just want to note that a crucial turning point in the closing down of Germany, which had been a parliamentary democracy, was when Hitler passed a law that essentially gave him the same powers. And it was over after that.
Absolutely, but I mean, I've seen you on television places talk about how you know the Clintons and you say that they're good folks who really want to help people. And Naomi, I think you're a good person. I think you're very intelligent, and I've read some of your books and a lot of your writings, and I believe you mean well, and I believe you're very intelligent. But specifically, and this isn't some Clinton bash fest, I want to talk about the left-right paradigm here for a moment. And I saw you at a meeting where there were obviously a lot of leftists even asking you, well, hey, aren't the Clintons bad too? Specifically, what did you do with the Clintons?
Yeah, let me be super, super clear so I'm not overstating, my knowledge or participation. I know them slightly. My children's father knows them intimately because he wrote a number of President Clinton's speeches and Mrs. Clinton's speeches during the, I believe, first and second Clinton term. And so every day he was working with them, so I watched or working with his staff, so I watched the process very close up, and I, watched the development of the ideas and the speeches, and I, know a number of the people who work with them, so my sense of them, I've met them briefly socially, or at events, but my sense of them from many people who work intimately with them is that they're decent, well-intended people who have made a lot of, the kinds of compromises that people make when they're engaging with this really horrible power structure.
Well, let me just explain why I brought this up.
Sure.
It's this. I mean, a lot of people, what you'd call from the traditional left, they're well-meaning, they're caring people, they really believe in what they're doing, they're right on a lot of issues, wrong on some other issues from my constitutionalist/libertarian, perspective, historically. The reason I raise this is I've been talking about the police state since I got on there 13 years ago. I knew about civilian inmate labor camp programs when they were declassified in 97. They've been going on for a decade with prisoners being taken to military bases. I knew about all these things. And before Bill Clinton, before Jimmy Carter, the apparatus of the military-industrial complex and the defense contractors controlled by the big central banks of the world and the Fortune 100 were already writing white papers wanting to build up the police state, apparatchik here in the United States. And so my point is, Clinton, Bush, as bad as Bush is, he literally is just a front man for a larger, more entrenched system. And, of course, he's pushed harder than anybody, but that's pretty much the time and space we're in. So my whole point is George Bush may leave office in a year. We hope he does. Whether Hillary Clinton or Rudolph Giuliani or I'm praying Ron Paul gets in, regardless, my point is to you, you're discovering all this now, and that's wonderful, and you're bringing your great, gravitas and acumen to this. My issue is, I'm telling you from my research, it's crystal clear, this is a larger underlying agenda by the bureaucracy, by the global corporate interest, and so I'm just hoping we can get people like yourself to shift this out of just a George Bush discussion into a larger discussion.
Well, that's fascinating, Alex, because, the conclusion you're reaching, you're sort of meeting the extreme left, where a number of them have gone when they, people who protest the World Trade Organization and who basically say that democracy is a sort of thin cover for corporate interests, which are sort of moving powers in the global not only economy but political sphere now, and that everything else is just window dressing. I mean, I was just reading Chalmers Johnson, Blowback and the Tsars of Empire, who is a leading, I believe, far left political analyst, and he reaches the same conclusions you seem to have. I do want to say one thing, though. I mean, when people get to that point, they just become despairing. And, what can you do when you reach that sense of, well, there's bedrock here of these interests that are, unassailable.
But, Naomi, I think we have to assess just how bad it really is, or any fixes, or blaming it all just on Bush instead of the underlying cause. I mean, I want to stop this. I want to reverse it.
Right. Well, okay, I just want to say one thing. When I was watching the Clinton terms close up, and when I was working on the Gore campaign formally, not doing what the RNC, mythically spun that I was doing, which was sort of some weird wardrobe thing, but advising on women's issues and getting out the youth vote, I did see that people who are engaging in democracy were able to pass some good laws and constrain some excesses of corporate capital.
Oh, there's no doubt that the citizens have power and that we're in the game. I'm not saying it's all over and, they have total air superiority. I'm just saying we need to assess that this is both parties, this is system-wide. Bush is just the most virulent manifestation of an overall illness. Naomi Wolf, stay with us. I want to shift gears with Naomi Wolf. Lawyers for victims of 9/11 and people in the surrounding area are bringing forward evidence. We already knew this, but Christina Todd Whitman reported to the White House that it was horrible asbestos, mercury dust, the thousands of mercury switches in the thermostats, the computers, very toxic. Tens of thousands of computers turned into aerosolized dust. The concrete's also with a lime in it is very bad in your lungs. And then now a bunch of different hospitals and institutions in New York and around the country have done the CAT scans going back 5 years ago. Some of people's lungs have ounces apiece of this stuff in them. And Bush told her suppress it. And that's now been declassified. That's now come out. They took the bodies, or the remains of half the victims, or 47% of the victims, and they put them in the landfill, then used that for aggregate to fill potholes, Associated Press. Naomi, of course, lives there. Her son got asthma after all this happened, and you can put two and two together. So I mean, just from that perspective of them lying to us, you say you have some questions about 9/11. Can you talk about, first off, the dust?
Well, let me just be super clear again, because there are so many people waiting to take things out of context. I know that, my son was a few blocks away from Ground Zero and stayed there because, Christy Whitman said the air is safe to breathe, and I couldn't believe at that time that the government would lie to us about something so substantial. And I know that my son, does have, breathing problems. But I don't know, I don't have, a smoking gun to say that one leads to the next, although I can say my mother's instinct, and I've said this in public, felt that, it wasn't safe to be in the area, that there was something very, very toxic going on. And I'm, of course, sorry now that we didn't, err on the side of caution and move the children out of the city during that time.
But, now we've had hundreds and hundreds of firefighters and police and medical workers have died, and we have the media still kind of playing that down. The cold-bloodedness of just telling everybody in all those dozens of schools in the area and hundreds of businesses, thousands of businesses, that it's safe. That illustrates just the ruthlessness of these people.
Yeah. Well, there I do have to agree with you. Though I don't know that one caused the other, I do know that it is, brutal, as you say, to expose children, not just my son, but all the city's children in southern Manhattan, to such a toxic, mess that is, scarring people, killing people now, and God knows what, future years will turn up, not just for the little ones, but, I'm not happy that I breathed all that stuff, that my loved ones did. People were wearing, masks outside, and our children were wearing masks, and then at a certain point, it's like, Christy Whitman says, you don't have to wear the masks. Okay, we'll take our masks off. That was sort of really a brutal, cold-hearted, devastating moment. So when, in terms of 9/11, all I know is that, citizens, and not, I've gone across the country and I've met a lot of people talking about these issues. And I have met a lot of very serious, credible, sensible people with various knowledge bases who would like more information, or who have a sense of unease, or who feel like more questions need to be asked and more responsibly answered about that whole narrative. And I do feel, and I've said this in public and I'll say it again, 60%, I think, of citizens in the U.S. now think that we're not getting the whole truth from the government. And so that's a substantial amount of unease, and that's not a good sign in democracy.